Two major blackouts at the end of July left nearly half of India without power and brought much of life to a standstill. But although such a massive failure is unprecedented, power cuts are a regular part of life here. Over 300 million people have no electricity to begin with, and most villages still operate without power. And many of those who do have access rely on some sort of backup generator to cope in the likely event of an outage. For millions of ordinary people, power cuts are an inconvenience. But for manufacturers and other companies, intermittent power is a significant problem that can incur high costs and affect output.
Even on our weekly days, or sometimes or many times the power is not available, and at that time we have to run our total plant on generator, where cost is almost 4 times the normal cost of power.
Even with dozens of thermal and hydro-powered plants, India faces an annual electricity shortfall of 10%. And the government's aim to boost capacity by 100,000 megawatts by 2015 seems ambitious, given its track record of missing infrastructure and power targets.
I believe that the 100,000 number is really not going to be achieved. The demand for power sector has grown at about 9%, whereas coal availability has increased by 6%.
As government inaction and investor gloom overshadow the domestic economy, private power companies are struggling to get much-needed mega power projects off the ground.
There are significant reforms that have to be played out in the distribution sector. First is the tariff should become equal or consistent with the cost of power generation. The other big challenge that the Indian power sector faces is the availability of fuel. Today, Coal India produces about 460 million tons, but the demand is at least 20% more than that.
The power sector's woes aren't just limited to inadequate bureaucracy and infrastructure. Financing is a major hurdle. Companies also face shortages in the coal required to run their plants and have to give away power at unsustainably low prices.
The private sector power companies are in a very difficult position. They're squeezed between the government on both sides. The biggest ripple effect that I can see is that if the power companies can't operate profitably, they're not generating cash flow, which means they can't repay the banks for the huge amounts of money that they've borrowed from the banks to build these power plants.
India's creaky power system is a regular letdown, as it showed only too clearly during July's blackouts. And unless the government here can move quickly to increase capacity, the country's dreams of even basic growth may be put on hold, let alone its aspirations of superpower status. James Crabtree, The Financial Times in Mumbai.